Hello, we're glad you're here. We're gonna wait a few minutes and let everybody come in. The weather has been beautiful, so I bet you've been out in your gardens, and I just went through and chopped and dropped my fava beans so that they would have time to decompose before I'm ready to plant those beds. Okay, let's see. My name is Toby Brown, and I am a Sonoma County Master Gardener and a Sonoma County Master Food Preserver. So we've got a fabulous lineup for you today. And our first speaker is going to be Jude Sharp, and she's our bug lady. And she's going to tell us about our favorite bug, I'm joking, is the cucumber beetle. Ellie Samuel is going to show you a new tool that we have. And Fred Jarvis is going to tell you all about how to prune raspberries and what to do with your raspberries this time of year, because this is my last jar of raspberry jam, and it's raspberry apple. This goes so fast. All of our raspberries usually can get us through the whole winter. So we have tricks to show you, and Fred, and a lot of it's in the pruning. Sue Lovelace is going to show you how to make some use of some of the berries that you have still in your freezer from last year. So we'll go ahead and get it started. All right, so we just want to make sure you know your audio and video will be on for this webinar. You're going to use the Q&A box for questions. And our Zoom talk is being recorded. I want you to notice this full watering can. This is what we all were thinking would last in January. And now, sadly, we haven't had rain for quite a while, and we love the weather, but now's the time to start looking at our website and going through and figuring out some ways you can save water this year, things that you aren't doing already. Here's our food gardening page, or our UC Master Gardener page. And if you go to drop down menu, and you can see all of our resources for growing food with less water. And you might want to just sort of think about what you're planting this year in particular, and only do the things that you're really going to eat, because we really are probably going to have to watch the water very closely. Okay. So first off, we practice sustainable gardening, and we plant the right plant in the right place at the right time. This will save water, and it will save you lots of headaches. Nurture and protect the soil always. We mulch to save water and prevent weeds. I'm doing extra mulching right now just to make sure that I'm retaining any water. We practice minimal soil disturbance. We try not to go through and till the soil. Now, Jude's going to tell you something today about lightly tilling to help us with cucumber beetles. So pay attention to that part. We use flowers that benefit plants and beneficial insects. You should be watching right now what's blooming in your garden. And if you don't have anything blooming, you might want to go through and for next year, figure out something that will bloom this time of year. We use compost and organic amendments. And that's how we garden sustainably in Sonoma County. So first up, we have Jude Sharp, and Jude is a master gardener, and she is going to tell us all about the dreaded cucumber beetle.
Well, maybe not everything, but as just a kind of quick overview of cucumber beetles and identifying and managing them to the extent possible. Next slide. Okay. Really important to be able to identify cucumber beetles. The photographs on the left show you the cucumber beetle eggs, larvae, the spotted beetle, and the striped cucumber beetle. Look at these photographs and then look at the photograph on the right, which shows you a similar looking bug, but the photograph on the right is of a ladybug, and the ladybug larva, the pupa, and the eggs. Please be able to identify the ladybug beetle and the larva, because they are your friends. The photographs on the left are cucumber beetles. You do not want these, but the photographs on the right, you do want. So do not destroy the larva or the beetles or the eggs or the pupa. Okay, next slide, please. Cucumber beetles will destroy all parts of cucurbit plants. The larvae will eat the underground roots and stems, and the adults will eat the foliage of seedlings and mature plants. They can carry bacteria that cause wilt, and once infected, the plant will die. So you really want to manage these guys before they get established in your garden. Next slide, please. The adults winter over in leaf litter. They mate and lay eggs in spring in soil at the base of the host plant. So this is a good time to pay attention because they're going to be mating and laying eggs. The eggs hatch in 7 to 10 days into larvae. The larvae complete development in about 15 days. They chew on roots, stunting or killing plants. Next slide, please. Early season management is critical. Clean up the garden debris at the end of the season and before mating and egg laying begins. You can try planting less susceptible varieties of cucurbits. But after harvest and in the spring, lightly till the soil to kill the eggs and larvae so that you don't have to deal with these mature guys. Next slide. Consider planting starts of susceptible plants rather than seeds. And if you plant starts, mulch the starts with mulch the starts after planting to deter eggs and larvae. And you can mulch them with anything actually, but mulch so that you deter the eggs. Use row covers early in the season to physically protect the plants from insects, and then remove the cover when flowers are present so that you're sure to get fruit. Next slide. You can interplant veggies with high scent herbs that repel pests. You can attract beneficial insects. Rotate crops so that you don't grow cucurbits in the same place before or after one another. And for heavy infestations in the early morning when the pests are still sluggish, that's very important because they're very fast and they don't want to be trapped. So in the early morning when the pests are still sluggish, either hand vacuum and empty what you hand vacuum into soapy water so that you destroy them, or hand pick. Good luck hand picking, but hand vacuuming works well. Next slide. The important thing about cucumber beetles is that they're a challenge to control. So you want to avoid an infestation. You want to intervene early and often and be ruthless. Okay.
Awesome.
That's it.
Thank you very much. And I have to say, I did a piece on cucumber beetles, one of our first veggie happenings, and I had a terrible infestation, and going out early in the morning with a little cup of soapy water and your tweezers and glasses if you need them to see close up, and right around the base of the plant, you can get them, and you can get a whole bunch, and it really makes you feel great. But if you do all of the things that Jude was saying, you'll have fewer of them. These are some of the things that we learn as we go. Okay, so I want to tell you our next tool that Ellie Samuel is going to tell you about is this, and this is a soil blocker, and it's to make blocks of soil for planting your seeds. So I said, hey, Ellie, look at this great thing. And then Ellie will take it from here, and she's going to show you. She's going to talk just a little bit first. So what she said to me after she looked it up and saw how expensive it was. Ellie, take it away.
Okay. So the first thing I want to say is that I put a link from the University of Georgia that is very good and explains all about soil blockers. But one of the things they suggest is using peat moss in your soil mixture. The peat moss is no longer sustainable. It's found in everything. If you look at bags of soil potting mix, there's peat moss in there. And oftentimes, if you go to gardening sites, they suggest mixing peat into the soil to aerate it and to retain water. We are asking you to try and cut back your use of peat moss, because we certainly don't want to destroy every living peat bog that there is. So this is what happened after Toby showed me the soil blocker, and I went home, and this is what happened. Hi, thank you for joining me for the tool portion of Veggie Happenings. Today, I'm going to teach you how to make your own soil blocker. A soil blocker isn't what it sounds like. It's nothing that keeps soil back. It creates blocks of soil that you use for planting instead of pots or big trays with depressions. If you go onto the internet, you see a tool that looks like this, and it makes little blocks of soil to put your seeds in. I was very intrigued when I found out about this, and then I looked at the price. And I said to my husband, do you think you could make me something like this? And he thought about it, and he came up with a plan, and I'm going to share it with you now. The first thing you need to make a soil blocker is 1 2-inch PVC pipe cut to 4 inches. You need a 6-inch carriage bolt that's a 1/4 inch shank. You need 3 1/4 inch nuts. You need 2 2-inch washers, and you need a 2-inch grip tip cap that has had a 1/4 inch hole drilled into the top. The only tools you need for this project is the drill to make the hole and 2 pairs of pliers. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to take our carriage bolt, take a washer, put it on, and then we're going to take one of our nuts and we're going to screw it all the way to the top. And it's going to look like this. Then you take your pliers and you tighten your nut. Then we take the cap and we put this in. Now we're up to making the hole maker into the seed block. So we screw the nut a 1/4 inch up. And then we take our second washer and we put it on. And we take the nut, the third nut, we screw it on. And again, we take our pliers and we tighten the nuts. Now we take the cap and the shank and we put them on and we press down hard so it holds in place, and you have your own homemade seed blocker. So now we have to fill the seed blocker. What I did was I took 4 parts compost, 1 part potting soil, and 1 part of coconut fiber known as coir, which you have to take out and you have to soak to get it malleable. I took it and I mixed it all together, and it's damp but not soaking wet. I then take my scoop and I'm putting in 2 scoops of my mixture. I'm pressing it down, then I turn it over and I press hard and I carefully lift up, and out comes a perfect little soil block. I have my tray here with one already made. You put the second one in, and there'll be room for 6 of them in this little tray. You then take your seed and you put your seed in the hole and take a little mixture, cover it gently. Now this is very moist. During the week, you check your soil block. If it feels as if it's drying out, do not water it from the top. You take your trusty little spray bottle and you just spray it. And that is how you make your own soil blocks.
Ellie, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Not right now. The only thing I wanted to add was that if you feel the hole needs to be deeper, you can adjust the nut on the shank of the soil, of the homemade soil blocker, to make it bigger so it makes a deeper hole.
Awesome. Okay. And so the main benefits, I answered a question. Hopefully that answered your question. The big plus about doing this is it air prunes the roots. So there's a little bit of space between them. And so you don't get the circling of the roots around in your pot. So then there's less transplant shock when you go through and put them into your garden, and you don't have, the plastic pots, which is good. I know we all save our pots and use them 1,000 times, but I've already tried this, and you can experiment around with a lot of different combos of soil. So, and
Also,
it works well. Mm-hmm.
Also, Toby, the other thing is a lot of people use peat pots because you can stick them right into the ground. And by doing this, you're not using up the peat supply.
Right. that sounds good. And also those things, I can never get them to decompose like they're supposed to. So, but this is, it's just something we wanted to let you know that's a little bit new and different. Well, not super new. So now we have Fred Jarvis, and he is a food gardening specialist, master gardener, and he was part of our berry group. We had a group because we had lots of people that wanted to grow berries and nobody that felt like they knew enough about all of them to teach. So we did lots of research, and we had a dog and pony show that we did before the COVID. And Fred can talk on all berries, but today he's going to talk to us about raspberries. Okay, so Fred, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. So we're going to just focus today on one part of the raspberry world. That's the fall-bearing, ever-bearing types of raspberries. And my preference for doing that is I've had more success growing those types of berries than the summer-bearing types, and I've not grown the black raspberries nor the purple one. In terms of the raspberries, the red ones and the yellow ones are just different, have different genetic makeups, but you treat them the same in terms of when you're growing them. And one of the motivations for planting right now is the bare roots are in season. It's a good way to get the plants. They're less expensive. There are more varieties available. And it's kind of a miraculous thing that if you plant a bare root now, you have this little 6-inch snippet of a plant. And in 6 months, it'll be 4, 5, maybe more feet tall. It'll be bearing raspberries on the tips. The cane that does that is called a Primocane. So sometimes you'll see when you're shopping, they might call this fall bearing, ever bearing, Primocane bearing as well. When we show the topics we're going to cover, just briefly, the growing requirements for success, the bare root planting, the varieties that are available, and a little bit on pruning. These are the main growing requirements for success for the raspberries. You really would like a sunny location. Typically that's 6 to 8 hours a day. They will tolerate some shade. And my understanding is that in the hotter parts of the county than where I live, they really need some afternoon shade. So that might be naturally from the vegetation where you've planted them or using shade cloth. In Sebastopol, unless it's a really scorching day, my raspberries do fine, in the full sun, but they can get a little sun scald when we've had 3 or 4 days that are quite hot. But then those berries just, go on and new ones show up in a few more days. So that's fine. We need well-drained soil with a lot of compost because all of the raspberries are prone to root rot. Some are more prone than others. You're going to need a water source in the summer. They're fairly requiring of water, like 1 to 2 inches a week. And most of them will do better with a support structure, some kind of a trellis. Go on to the next one. Next slide, please. Yeah. This is a raised row. It's recommended so that you help avoid the root rot problems. It's kind of been constructed from the native soil with a lot of compost added. Our Master Gardener Handbook has all the, it's like a recipe book. It tells you all the little details about sizes and dimensions, and at least, you don't have to have all that memorized, but in our handbook, it recommends that your raised row be about 1 to 2 feet wide and about 8 to 10 inches high. You want to have your raised row be weed-free, and you want to use a lot of compost. I use about 50% compost and 50% native soil, and the Master Gardener Handbook gives you some other. If you want to take a scale out into your garden and measure it all out, you can get more precise. Okay, next slide. It's just to show that you need to irrigate in the warm season. I'm not going to go into details, but you want to apply that the right amount of water so that your raspberries are moist but not soggy. You don't want to overwater. I mean, you don't want to waste the water, but also if you're overwatering, you will be risking the root rot problems. Go to the next one. These are examples of some raspberry trellises. Generally, they're pretty self-supporting, and you're just trying to corral them a little bit just so they don't fall on the ground. I've seen this happen pretty easily that, you know, when they start fruiting in August and they're going to fruit up on the tips of the canes. And then, you know, so they're getting top heavy, and then the wind blows as it does a lot of times, and the berries will end up on the cane top and the berries will be on the ground, which will make them prone to rotting, and you'll have insect problems. I just want to point out the cane on the right. One of my neighbors asked, what's a cane? Well, it's kind of a woody stem, and that's kind of what a lot of the berries have. I'm going to the next. And this is to show, I wanted to kind of focus in on could you kind of blow up the picture of the bare root?
There we go.
This is really beautiful. You know, this shows a bare root plant. It's very typical. There's the stem on the right, and you can see there's two shoots coming off this prime root, and that prime root's really a rhizome. And when you plant this plant, these prime roots, these rhizomes, they don't want to be buried too deep. You don't want to get them deeper than 1 to 2 inches so that these shoots can come up, and those will be the canes that are going to be growing here in the next month, 2 months. And so when you plant these, it's not a whole lot different than a lot of other things you plant. You certainly want to be very careful getting the cane planted. I mean, if you buy it, you don't want it sitting out in the sun, will dry out. And if you can't plant it the same day, I would put it in the soil and, you know, maybe for just a few days until you're ready to plant it. You want to spread out the roots. As I mentioned, you want them to be 1 or 2 inches deep. You want you don't want to plant the cane any deeper than it was where it was growing in the nursery. Then there are a lot of dimensions about how far apart to plant. I like to plant them 2 feet apart because I don't like to crowd the roots. And you want to mulch to help minimize water loss, and the weeds. You want to minimize the weeds that way too. So we go to the next one. So these are some of the varieties of the fall-bearing, ever-bearing raspberries listed. There are a lot more varieties, and also new ones are coming along all the time. And then they're also just, it's interesting to me that they're proprietary varieties out there in the world that we don't have access to buying. So I just mentioned a few things about these varieties. I tried to grab a few names that I could see at the local nursery. The local nursery in my area only had 4 of these varieties, but the Baba berry was developed about 100 years ago in California, and it's supposed to have the nice quality of being able to tolerate more heat than some of the other raspberry varieties. The fall gold is a yellow goldish type berry, and I know several people that just love this berry. I think it's okay personally, but it just, you know, when it gets to fruit flavors, different people have different ideas what they like. The heritage variety was the mainstay fall-bearing raspberry grown in the state of California. You're not gonna go to the supermarket and find a heritage variety at this point, because plant breeders have found ways to grow bigger berries with better flavor, berries that ripen earlier in the season than the heritage, so they can have a longer growing season. Given the problems with root rot, the Josephine and Polka are supposed to be more resilient to root rot. A lot of these other berries, I see very conflicting information in the literature about how resistant they are. Some of them say, oh, Carolyn's better than Heritage, and others say Carolyn's going to have a lot of root rot. And you're just like, I don't know how you make sense of it. And this isn't just marketing stuff. This is coming from different places around the country, different universities and stuff. I've grown the vintage raspberry. It was a bare root that was available a few years ago at my local nursery. It was developed by the Agriculture Research Service in Oregon State University. It's a very nice plant, has nice big berries, nice bright red, and it's very abundant. And the only downside I have been able to observe over 4 years is after 3 years, it just starts to diminish the number of canes it's producing and the amount of fruit. But the little suckers that are growing from this variety 5-6 feet away, they're just dynamite. So it has some disadvantages that you have to be aware of, but overall I think you could grow it very well. The other thing I was going to say about Heritage is there has, as a 50-year-old variety, there have been some criticism of its flavor being bland. In the University of Utah did a study of consumers at a farmer's market of 10 different fall-bearing, ever-bearing varieties, and Heritage came in third. So I think if you're a farmer growing Heritage, you can bring in your nice produce to market. They're not that bad. I mean, they're okay. And certainly when you cook with them, I've had the raspberry jam made from Heritage and made from vintage. When it's being cooked, you cannot tell any difference at all. And the reason I bring up all this is Heritage is really very available as a bare root. It was the first raspberry I was able to get to kind of be successful with. I think there are probably other ones that one could do better, but if you've never been successful with a raspberry, you've never tried it, I think Heritage would be a fine one to go with. We can go on to the next one. The next slide is pruning. And one thing about the fall-bearing, ever-bearing varieties, there's 2 methods you can use to prune them. I'm thinking the better way to prune personally, and maybe this is what a lot of farmers do just to save money and everything, is just cut them all down in the winter and just let them all come back as the Primocane, let them fruit in August on through the fall, and then just start the cycle up again next year. Okay, and then, so anyway, this in the foreground of this is the Primocane. This is taken a couple of weeks ago. In the foreground is the Primocanes, the brand new canes coming up. In the background are the more woody canes that grew last year. The tips of those canes bore fruit last year. Though those were cut off, and then the lower part of the cane will have fruiting laterals. They'll show up and they'll fruit in June or July. So you don't gain any more fruit by growing some, so that some are last year's and some are this year's, than you would if you just cut them all down and just got everything in the August through fall period. And I think we have the next slide. This is just the cut. Just cut them to the level of the ground each year, which helps you clean up your garden, clean up potential disease things laying around. And fortunately, we have a very nice video. We're not showing it, but I'm going to let you know. You can go to the next slide. So we have 15-minute video that's showing more hands-on out in the garden doing pruning, and I think it would help settle what we're talking about if you see something more slowly and more hands-on. That's all I was going to say. I think we all could be as happy as kings growing our raspberries, enjoying eating them raw, and also cooking with them. Little segue.
Awesome. Very, very good. Yes. And let's see. One thing I wanted to say too is all berries are pretty thirsty. So if you keep that in mind, if you're planting bare root raspberries now, because, we may be limiting water, and a few can go a long way, just like Fred was saying. We've got lots of good questions for you, Fred.
Can I add one more thing I forgot that's kind of important? Is the raspberry varieties are self-fruitful, which means you only need one variety. You don't have to have different varieties to bear fruit. Just one variety will do it.
Perfect. Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so next up we have master food preservers. And the Master Food Preserver Program's mission is to keep Californians safe, as well as use culturally appropriate research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, really big problem, and increasing food security and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. So today we have Sue Lovelace that's going to talk to us about creating sweet fruit-based dressings. So take it away, Sue.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I wanted you to see what was the inspiration for my search of a fruit-based dressing. When I come out of the garden with a handful of greens, such as these, I want something sweet and fruity to eat with them. This raspberry fruit dressing is just the ticket. I use this on my greens. I don't even use an oil. It's just, I can't tell you how good it is. And it's perfect for Valentine's Day and a perfect lead in from Fred on how to take care of raspberries. And maybe you have some from last year in the freezer. So I'll show you how to make this in a little bit. So with fresh or frozen fruit, like these raspberries, and this is only a cup of raspberries. So, you know, it doesn't take a lot from your freezer to make this dressing. A simple syrup such as this, and I'll go over this with you as well. A dash of salt and champagne vinegar. And I like champagne vinegar because it's more mellow than, say, the apple cider vinegar or the white wine vinegar, but it's up to you. But this is what I use. One could also make fruit vinegars or herb vinegars. However, they take several weeks to come to flavor. When I bring in my greens, I want to have a dressing right away. And so that's the advantage of the fruit-based dressings, is that you can eat them as soon as you make them, and they last several weeks in the refrigerator. I wanted to call your attention to this lid. It's a canning jar, and this plastic lid is mandatory no matter what container you use. Metal lids and fruit-based dressings do not work. They react with each other. These lids are really great for canning jars in that they screw on. Some of them even have spouts, but they, you know, tighten up the jar and, you know, really work well. Okay, so let's look at other uses for these fruit-based dressings. Next slide, Pete, please. Okay, so as I said, you can use them on seasonal greens, all kinds of greens. They don't have to come from your garden. They can come from a farmer's market or the grocery store, but they're really good right now. And with this heat, they won't be as sweet, but still a good time to eat greens and fresh seasonal fruit. This dressing, like this salad that I'm showing you, has mandarin oranges. Really, it's good over a lot of fresh garden produce. You can use it as an accompaniment for meats and veggies. You can add it to meat glazes, make a marinade for chicken or turkey. You can combine it with sour cream or yogurt and maybe a bit of honey, probably not needed because the dressing is sweet for a dip. You can use it over ice cream. You can see I've been eating this stuff pretty often. Or you can use it to sweeten beverages. So lots of uses. Okay, so I wanted to go over this vanilla sugar syrup, because this will be your base for the dressings. It takes a bit of cooking, so that's why I did not demo it today, but it's pretty simple. This little amount took 2 cups of sugar to 1 cup of water, and you bring that to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, you simmer for 10 minutes covered. And then you cool that mixture down, and then you can add minced vanilla bean or pure vanilla. I've used both. They're both great. They basically taste the same, but if you use the vanilla bean, then you want to chop it real small and then strain it into a jar. And this will keep several weeks in the refrigerator. Okay, so we're gonna look at this link while I get my apron on and my hair tied back and wash my hands. I've already sanitized the area I'm working in, and I assembled all the ingredients and all the supplies ahead of time. I pre-measured, so that limits the amount of cross contamination, you know, going into a drawer or into the refrigerator to get something, you know, kind of invades the space with maybe germs you don't want there. So I'll explain it a little more, but right now I'm going to go tie my hair back, put an apron on and wash my hands, maybe adjust the computer a little so you can see my work surface. Oh, well, one thing I wanted to tell you is I'm making 2 different dressings today. I have all the supplies out, you know, why not? And the surface clean, why not do a couple dressings? And you'll see how quickly they go together. Okay, see you in a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue. And I wanted to take this time where she's getting all of her sanitation done to let you know that if you have other questions about food preserving, we do have a hotline that you can call, or you can send in your questions via email. And if you go to this, our site, Sonoma County Master Food Preservers, where this QR code leads you, under the About Us tab, that's where you'll find the email and the phone number. And then it'll, you know, we'll go ahead and research your question and get back to you. So that's a resource that we're providing right now. This will get you right to the Veggie happenings and give you the past ones that we've done and the resources that we have. So hopefully that'll work. This does not get to the Master Gardener side. I'll put that one up at the end. Okay, so as soon as Sue's ready, we'll go right to Sue.
Okay, let's roll them. Hi, everyone. I'm in my little kitchen and I'm all prepared to make these fruit dressings. So we'll start with raspberry. I'm going to make mango ginger as well, but right now we're going to make the raspberry. And like I said before, it takes a cup of raspberries, and I'm going to put that in a blender. that vanilla syrup that I talked about, a half a cup of that goes in the blender. I pre-measured all of this ahead of time. A dash of salt. And then I'm going to blend. Okay, the last step is the vinegar, the champagne vinegar. I have a half a cup of champagne vinegar. All of these recipes, like I mentioned earlier, will be on our website. I have a couple spatulas here because you'll want to just stir in the vinegar in the blender just to mix it in. And I didn't mention, but this is a big thing, to have several tasting spoons, because sometimes you need to taste to get the balance right. Let's see how we do. I'm tasting my vinegar, not my vinegar, my fruit dressing. Oh, it's really good. No adjustment needed. So the next step will be to strain this mixture into a large bowl or a measuring cup. And that's where the spatula comes in handy again. You just, it's a fine mesh strainer, so you'll want to kind of stir it around a little bit, and that kind of filters out the seeds. Okay, so then I've decided for this recipe of raspberry dressing, I'm going to use this little cruet that I've had for years. It has a plastic lid, which is good. I'm going to funnel the dressing into the cruet. Oh, doesn't that look good? It is good. Okay, so I'm going to rinse out my blender a little bit. It'll just take a second. Okay, so the next recipe is mango dressing, or mango fruit-based dressing. And I'm also going to include ginger. And so I peeled the ginger and I cut about an inch piece. I've fooled around with the recipe a little, and you know, it just depends on how much you like ginger, and a piece of it for our household works out great. So I'm going to put the mango into the blender. And this calls for a quarter of a cup of the simple syrup, a dash of salt, and then I'm going to blend as before. Smells great so far. I'm going to take a quarter of a cup of ginger, and with my other spatula, I'm just going to mix it around a little bit.
10 minutes,
Again,
Sue.
champagne vinegar. Plenty of tasting spoons here.
Sue, 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Oh, wow, this is really good. I'm serious, the mango is really good too.
I'll be right over, Sue.
Yeah. We had family over last weekend and we had like a little tasting test. I made the cranberry as well. And it was fun to see the differences, you know, in what people liked.
So you're straining it as you to get
Oh,
out the
yeah.
pulp.
I am straining it to get out the pulp. Sorry for blocking the view. I just had another little strainer, so this will take a minute to strain. I'm going to use a jar, canning jar, and then again, I want to emphasize, I've learned this the hard way, you don't use metal lids with these dressings. So I have my plastic lid, and I will strain this for the time element. I will strain them again later. It's also handy to have this is one of those Swedish washcloths, and it's handy to have those, you know, at your disposal when you set up the surface, because you'll want to wipe off the jar.
So Sue, I'm going to cut you off here pretty soon so we can get to a few questions before our time is up.
Okay, and then do we have time for the cranberry slide?
Sure. Comes the cranberry slide.
Okay, so just to summarize, if you look in the top left corner, I've put out all the ingredients. I've pre-measured, measured, I've sanitized the area and washed my hands, so we're ready to go. With the cranberry, and we had some from the holidays, which was great to use from the freezer. I put the cranberries in a pan with the vanilla syrup, and then I cooked it until the cranberries all popped. Then it went in the blender like the other two dressings, and then it was filtered into a cruet, like the cruet you see pictured here, plastic lid, again, non-metal lid. And all these dressings will keep in the refrigerator for several weeks, and the recipes are all on the recipe page. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Sue. We're going to go on and we'll take some questions. So here's some resources for food preservation, but if you go to that, use that QR code, it will give you these same resources plus the recipes that Sue has just told you about. And here's some resources from Master Gardener. These are wonderful. If you haven't looked at the UCIPM page, it's fabulous. And this time of year when the insects are starting to come out, that's sort of my first stop when I'm trying to figure out what to do. Okay. Here's the QR code again for Master Food Preservers. And I think we probably had that up. So let's go ahead and go on. Here's the one for Master Gardeners. And so this will take you to our food gardening page and give you all of our resources. Okay, so let's go to some questions. And Fred, you're going to be busy answering questions. So let's see. Let me come up to the beginning. First of all, Ellie, I just want to say, a viewer said, can your husband make a bunch of those little contraptions and we can pick them up? I'm not sure Barry would be really loving to do that, but
No,
maybe.
but he'll be flattered.
But she gave some really specific instructions on doing that. So Fred, here's a question for you. This question says, I didn't know that there were two different kinds of raspberries. When I purchased the plant, when I purchased the plants, how do I determine whether my raspberries are fall bearing or ever bearing now?
It'd
So-
be nice to know the name of the plant. And then you could look it up quite easily. If you don't know the name of the plant, I'm not sure what would be the right approach. I'm sure DNA testing would probably work.
Okay. And Kitty, who is one of our regular presenters, she and Fred and I were presented berries together, and she had said that if you don't know what kind yours are, that if you prune them like the Everbearing, then worst case is they'll only go once. But it's very easy to learn how to go through and prune them like they're Everbearing. And I do like that extended time to have the berries when they're ready. Okay, let's see. Fred, Sebastopol has good soil and Windsor has clay soil. Can I use that, or do I need to make a solid mixture or a soil mixture, I think?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent you have clay soil, you're fighting against getting good drainage.
Right.
So you might consider creating a raised bed or growing in a container of some sort, or you could do the raised row as I showed that slide. You might want to make it even a little higher than the one recommended. You might want to make it 1.5 feet high and add lots of compost to try to get the drainage that'll be beneficial.
Great answer. I am in Santa Rosa, and it gets hot, and we have clay soil, and we've planted on a hill. So, the water does sit there, but being on the hill provides us a little bit more drainage.
Yeah.
But, so depending on where you are, Fred's raspberries are beautiful and big and so Fred, can raspberries be pot grown rather than grown in the ground?
Yes, there are varieties specifically meant to be grown in a container. I think there's one called raspberry shortcake or something like that. But I think you could grow some of the other bigger ones too if you could provide a little support. I don't think I'd want to grow something 6 feet tall necessarily, but yes, you could do that.
Okay, awesome. And somebody else gave a little piece of advice that said that they've used Texas-sized tomato cages to support their raspberries, which is a great idea. And Fred, what's your favorite tasting raspberry?
Well, among the ones I have experience with, I like that vintage variety that was developed in Corvallis. I think it really has a very nice taste, and it has a nice bright red color, and it's like 1/3 bigger than the heritage. I'm sure there's some other really nice ones out there. That tasting test that was done at the University of Utah, where they did it at the farmers market, number 1 was Anne, which was a yellow variety, and number 2 was Polka, which is a variety that came from Poland. So there are probably some really nice varieties I haven't had the chance to taste, but it's kind of fun to try different ones.
It is. And you can tell Fred doesn't go to the nursery before he's researched. And Fred, have you noticed that the yellow raspberries, they tend to break apart faster or easier? They're harder for me to
Yeah, they're crumbly.
Crumbly, that's it. Yes. They're
Yeah.
very good, but
Yeah, they're a little crumbly.
yeah, I usually just eat those as I'm picking. So let's see. So here's another question for you, Fred. This person has a drip system irrigation in half barrel planters. Do raspberries do okay in containers?
Yes, they should be able to do it fine.
That's great. Okay. And so somebody else gave a little bit of advice that when you cut them to the level of the ground, you'd cut off the growing point. And so, but what you were saying is cut them down low, not all the way flush to the ground. So
I don't know that this is that. I don't think it matters. I think you could just get your lopper down right down, and then new canes are going to grow up off the primary roots, and around the crown there'll be new canes grow as well. I mean, you're not going down there to harm the crown. Just, I think it'll be fine.
Okay, okay, that's great. And so right now I wanted you to notice the picture that Fred showed of his raspberries now. He's in Sebastopol, I'm in Santa Rosa, and my raspberries don't look like that yet. I went down and looked at them this morning, and I've definitely got leaf buds on them, but they're not as far along as Fred's are
We're
right now.
dealing with different varieties. That one that's
Right.
robust is the
Yes.
vintage, and it really didn't want to go dormant this year.
Wow.
It's like, August is on its way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Okay. So I think, let me just double check the questions if we have any more. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to answer this. It says they're in Healdsburg and it's very hot. Do you need to try to give the raspberries some relief from the afternoon sun? Absolutely. We have ours. We have shade cloth over ours, and we're just in Santa Rosa. So you'll notice the little white pieces on them. That is a sunburn. So absolutely. Certain raspberries are not recommended for my climate in Petaluma. Certain raspberries are not recommended for my climate in Petaluma. Is that not an issue? Does it depend? Is there that much variance in the raspberries, Fred, as far as where you're going to plant them, as far as microclimates?
Well, I think there shouldn't be a huge difference between West County and Petaluma in terms of the weather. I usually think if the raspberries for sale at the local nursery, it's fine,
Right. Okay. And then last question, Fred, can you still cut to the ground now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I just like to have a little bit of fruit, few berries now and a few berries later. And that's why, but I do have the Everbearing raspberries. So, well, I think we're a little bit over our time. We really appreciate you being here and tuning in. Before you leave, if you want to add something into the Q&A as far as what you'd like to see, we have some great things that are planned for next month as well. And then obviously in April, we're going to be talking about tomatoes. So we hope to see you then. And thanks for joining us today.